Hi dear students, today we will begin our lesson with chapter number 2, page 18. Open your books at page 18. In this chapter you will find out about number 1, the structure of plant cell and animal cell. Now dear students, remember that plant and animal cell both are eukaryotic cells. Therefore, they are much similar to one another, except for a few organelles that are present in the animal cell and absent in the plant cell, and some of the organelles are present in the plant cell but absent in the animal cell. You will also study the functions of different parts of a cell. Parts of a cell means organelles present inside the cell. And you will also study tissue, organ and organ system. Okay. Now, cells from deep time. I would like you to open your books at page 18. In a long thin spike of limestone hanging down from the roof of a cave is called stalactite. Okay. Now, what this term means, we are going to explain it in a few moments. Okay. Cenotites are long thin rill of bacteria filled slime. Cenotites are found in the caves where the atmosphere contains large amount of smelly toxic gas, hydrogen sulfide. Cenotites are studied by biologists interested in organisms that can live in environments so strange that almost nothing else can live there. And these organisms are called extremophile, which means lover of the extreme environment. Now, cell from the deep time, it actually relates chapter number 2 to the real life. Means these are actually the living organisms. They live in places or in environment where no other living organism can compete or can survive. Therefore, these living organisms are said to be extremophile. Extremophile. Okay, look at here this word. This word is extreme, means something they relate to extreme. Extremophile means lover of the extreme condition of the environment, because they live in places where there is a smelly toxic gas like hydrogen sulfides. No living organism can compete or can survive over there. Therefore, these living organisms are said to be extremophiles. Okay. So now, dear student, we are going to study the cell structure. I would like you to open your books at page 19, 2.1. You can see the cell structure. And now you can see the different parts of the cell. There is a cell membrane, nucleus, nuclear envelope, cytoplasm, and vacuole. You can see it on figure 2.3, a typical animal cell, a liver cell, as seen with a light microscope. Dear students, remember that liver cells are highly active cells. They contain 1,000 to 2,000 mitochondria. Mitochondria are actually the factories that produce ATP, or they are factories of ATP. ATP molecule are the energy currency or universal energy currency for the living organism. It means that all the chemical reactions or all the processes or all the activities or function inside the body requires energy in the form of ATP, and this ATP is produced by the mitochondria. Mitochondria are present in both plants and animal cells, but there is no mitochondria in the prokaryotes. You are going to study them later in this chapter. Okay. All organisms are made of cells. So cells are the basic structural and functional unit of life. It means that if an organism doesn't contain cells in them, it means that it is not living. So this is actually the basic characteristic of a living organism. Cells are very small, so large organisms contain millions of cells. For example, a human contains trillions of cells. Okay, because Microscope cells are so small that you cannot see with naked eye, so you need a microscope to observe these cells. So whenever we study cells, we also study microscopes, because you cannot study cells without a study of the microscopes. So microscopy is important for the study of cells. The study of cells is called cytology or cell biology. Some organisms are unicellular. It means that whole organism is composed of only one cell. Uni means one, cellular. Unicellular, single-celled organism, which means that they are made of just a single cell. Bacteria and yeast are examples of a single-celled organism. Microscope. Dear students, look at the word microscope. Micro means small and scope means to see or to visualize or to observe. So this is actually a device or an instrument used to see smaller things very larger, or it is an instrument that can be used to see things they are invisible to the naked eyes. Microscope is a device which magnifies. Magnifies means make bigger, or it magnifies means extend the size of the smaller things, magnifies smaller things larger. There are two types of microscopes. One is called light microscope. Light microscope means that the source is light to observe the specimen. For example, you are going to observe the specimen, so you need light. Whatever source, from whatever source you get the light, but this requires light to observe the specimen. Electron microscope are more powerful than light microscope, therefore it requires beam of electron to observe the specimen. Light microscopes are of two types. One is called simple microscope and another is called compound microscope. Let me explain the simple microscope first. Simple microscopes are composed of only one lens. Hand lens, for example, is a simple microscope. Light microscope magnifies objects up to 10 times. Okay, means the power of magnification is very smaller. Compound microscope are composed of a series of two lenses, for example, eyepiece lens and a nosepiece lens. Compound microscope magnifies object up to 1500 times. It means that the magnification power of compound microscope is much higher as compared to the magnification power of a simple microscope. Okay. Now look at the structure of microscope. You can see that these are the eyepiece lenses and these are the nosepiece lenses. So this is actually a compound microscope, a good quality of compound microscope, and it can magnify object up to 1500 times. Now we are going to explain what electron microscope is. You can see them on page 19. Okay, so electron microscope magnifies objects up to 10 million times. Okay, it means that the magnification power of electron microscope is much higher than the light microscope. There are two types of electron microscope. One is called transmission electron microscope and another is called scanning electron microscope, or you can simply see scanning electron microscope, SEM, SIM. The magnification power is low but can make 3D images of the specimen. Okay, it actually scans the surface of the specimen and make 3D images of the specimen. Transmission electron microscope, the magnification power of this microscope is much higher as compared to the scanning electron microscope, but this microscope cannot make 3D images of the specimen. Now look at this structure. This is said to be the electron microscope. One of the main difference between light microscope and compound microscope, electron microscope, is light microscope is lighter in weight also, okay, and it is cheaper. Now if you compare the structure of light microscope to the electron microscope require a separate room, an isolated room to perform its function. Also, sometimes it requires 2 or more rooms to occupy. Now, this microscope, you can see all the specimens through these monitors, and you can take 3D images of the specimens. Okay, this microscope is much more powerful than the light microscope. Dear students, now what happens when you observe a cell, whether plant or animal cell, under a microscope? It tells you much more, or it shows much more detail of this tiny structure. Okay, one of them is the cell membrane. Cell membrane is the entry and exit of the cell, or in other words, it is actually the doors through which molecules move into the cell and move out of the cell. Plant and animal cells are surrounded by a membrane called cell membrane, or you can say cell surface membrane, or you can also say plasma membrane. Inside the cell membrane is a jelly-like substance called cytoplasm. Dear students, if you pay attention on page 19, you can see that the space between the nucleus and the cell surface membrane is filled with a jelly-like material, and this space is said to be the cytoplasm. All the organelles are present in here, and most of the chemical reaction or life processes takes place in here. Smaller structure called organelles are present in the cytoplasm. Okay, organelles are the distinct structure inside the cell. They perform a specific job or function. Each and every organelle has a specific function. Okay, the most obvious of these organelles are nucleus. Now, for example, if you look at page 19, you can see that there are many different structures or organelles, but nucleus is the most obvious of all. So this is most clear and you can see it very well. In plants, it's very difficult to see it because it is right against the wall. The vacuole of the plant is pushing the nucleus toward the wall, therefore you may not be able to see it very clearly. The cell membrane is very thin layer of protein and fat. So it means that if you will see the cell membrane through the microscope, magnifying up to 270 times, okay, then you will see that there are two lines. Okay, it means that it is a lipid bilayer. Okay, the inner layer is lipids and the outer are phosphate. Okay, you will study them in more detail in class 11. It's very important to the cell because it controls the entry and exit of the cell. As a door control entry and exit of a room or of a house, so is the case in the cell membrane. The cell membrane is partially permeable. It means that it allows only certain molecules to move into the cell and certain molecules to move out of the cell. For example, carbon dioxide gas is not required for the cell, therefore it moves out of the cell, and oxygen gas along with the other substances like glucose are required by the cell, so they move into the cell. Now look at this structure of the cell. This you can see there is the cell surface membrane, and there are tiny pores in them. With the help of these tiny pores, molecules move into and move out of the cell. These structures, the red color, these are the mitochondria. These are very important structures. Now you can see that these are the vessels. Just because this is an animal cell contains many vessels, 1, 2, 3 and other. Okay, these are also called vesicles. They contain solution of sugar. Okay, this is the nucleus, and inside the nucleus you can see there is another structure, and that is said to be nucleolus. It's not properly visible, but still there is this structure. Okay, now this yellow part is said to be endoplasmic reticulum, just because it is an extension of the nuclear pore. So this is said to be rough endoplasmic reticulum because ribosomes are attached to them. Ribosomes are the tiny factories inside the cell. Okay, they produce protein for the plants, tiny factories of protein. Okay, now this is the cell membrane. The space between the cell membrane and the nucleus is filled with a jelly-like material. mostly water. Okay, this is said to be the cytoplasm. Most of the chemical reaction takes place right here. Okay, now these structures are said to be the ribosomes. We are going to study in more detail in the coming lessons. Cell wall. Remember that cell wall is only present in the plant cell. Animal cells do not contain any cell wall. All plant cells are surrounded by a cell wall made mainly of cellulose. Let me explain the term cellulose for you. Cellulose are polysaccharides. Polysaccharides means many sugar molecules join together to form a larger molecule, and the larger molecule is said to be the polysaccharide cellulose. Remember that the type of glucose they make the cellulose is beta glucose. Beta glucose is actually a type of glucose they make up the cellulose. Paper which is made from cell wall is also made of cellulose. For example, if you want to see where the cellulose is, just a paper in your book is a cellulose. Okay. Animal cells have never cell wall made of cellulose, okay, because they are not protected by cell wall. Cellulose belongs to a group of substances called polysaccharide we just explained. Cellulose form crisscross over one another to form a very strong covering to the cell. This helps to protect and support the cell. Dear students, I would like you to draw the line on the paper, on a blank paper, vertically and horizontally, and you will observe tiny boxes or tiny pores. Now you can compare this structure to the crisscross of microfibril of the cellulose. Cellulose are actually made by microfibril, means the lines. For example, you draw the line and the line is said to be a microfibril. Many microfibrils crisscross over one another to form a mesh, and that is said to be the cellulose. What is the function of cellulose? It protects the plant cell and it supports the plant cell in upright position. For example, you might have seen that a plant have weight of several tons. It can withstand the weight, it can lift the weight, okay, and also the wind and the storm exert a strong force upon the tree. Again, it can withstand against the wind and the storm. Okay, this strength is provided by the cellulose. The tensile strength of the cellulose can be compared to the tensile strength of the steel. It is, or in other words, you can say that it is as harder as the steel. If the cell absorbs a lot of water and swell, the cell wall stop it bursting. For example, you might have seen that, let's suppose you have a football. A football is actually contain a bladder inside the football. Now, for example, if there is no football and you are just pumping the air into the bladder will burst open. Now, what is the function of football? The football is actually protecting the bladder. Okay, without the football, the bladder will burst open. Now the football is protecting it from bursting open. Same is the case right here. For example, the cell wall protects the animal cell from bursting open, because if you place the plant cell in the fresh water, it will absorb lots of water, and the cell wall is there to protect the plant cell from bursting open. Cell walls are fully permeable because there are larger spaces, therefore molecule can move into and move out of the cell wall. Now we are going to explain the cytoplasm. Okay, cytoplasm is actually the place between the nucleus and the cell surface membrane. It contains many different types of organelles and it is filled with a jelly-like material, mostly water. The space between cell surface membrane and nucleus is filled with a jelly-like material called cytoplasm. It is nearly all water, about 70% is water in many cells. It contains many substances dissolved in it, especially proteins. Now we studied that there are many different types of many ribosomes inside the cytoplasm, and these ribosomes produce proteins. So this cytoplasm contains proteins produced by the ribosomes. Many different metabolic reactions, the chemical reactions of life. Metabolic reactions are of two types. Inside the body, sometimes smaller molecules are broken to form larger molecules, and larger molecule again can be smaller molecules join together to form larger molecules, and larger molecule again can be broken to release smaller molecules. These chemical reactions are said to be metabolism. In other words, we can define metabolic reaction as anabolic reaction and catabolic reaction. Anabolic reactions are all those reactions in which smaller molecules link up with one another to form larger molecules. For example, amino acids are smaller molecules. Amino acids link up with one another to form larger molecule called proteins. Proteins are said to be the giant molecule or big molecule. This type of chemical reaction inside the cytoplasm is said to be anabolic reaction. Now proteins can be broken down back to amino acids. Okay, this process is said to be catabolism. So metabolic reactions are of two types, catabolic and anabolic, in which a smaller molecule join together to form larger molecule. Again, larger molecule can be broken down to form smaller molecule once again. Vacuoles. Vacuoles are present in both plant and animal cell. In animal cell, there are many vacuoles but smaller. Okay, they contain a solution of sugar. Plants cell can also contain vacuole but larger. A vacuole is a space in a cell surrounded by a membrane and containing a solution. What type of solution? Sugar. Plant cell have very large vacuole which contain a solution of sugar and other substances called cell. Now, in other words, you can say that the solution present inside the vacuole is said to be cell. A full vacuole presses outward on the rest of the cell and help to keep it in shape. Okay? Animal cells have much smaller membrane-bounded space called vesicle. May contain food or water. So vesicle can be compared to the vacuoles in the plant cells. Chloroplast. Now if you look at this, one of the organelle inside the plant cell is said to be plastid. Plastid are of three types: chloroplast, chromoplast and leucoplast. So look at here, chloro. The term chloro means green. Plastid. So this is the green plastid. Dear students, remember one thing, that chloroplast is the ancient bacteria, okay, because it has its own DNA and ribosomes, okay, which is a proof that this was a living organism in the past. Now it works as organelle inside the eukaryotic cells. Chloroplasts or organelles present only in the plant cell. They are not present in the animal cell because they absorb sunlight energy. They contain chlorophyll, which absorbs sunlight energy and perform the process of photosynthesis. They contain chlorophyll specially designed to absorb light energy, which can be used for making food for the plants by photosynthesis. Okay? Photosynthesis is the process by which green plants can manufacture their own food particles. Green plants means leaves are usually green. Sunlight shines upon the leaves. The chlorophyll present inside the leaf absorbs the sunlight energy and they produce the glucose, and the process is said to be photosynthesis. So all the plants, they contain chloroplast in them. They can photosynthesize, they can manufacture their own food particle by the process of photosynthesis. Chloroplast often contains starch grains, okay, because chloroplast perform the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis produces glucose. Glucose link up with one another to form starch molecules, okay. Starch are absent in the animal cell, okay. Animal cell never contains starch grain because they never contain chloroplast, okay. Now look at here, some animal cell however do have or produce tiny grains of another substances similar to starch called glycogen. Glycogen, you can compare the structure of glycogen to the starch, okay. Means glycogen are polysaccharides in the animal cell, starch are the polysaccharides in the plant cells. The granules are found in the cytoplasm, not inside the chloroplast. Now look at this structure. This is the structure of chloroplast, okay. Now this is the outer covering of the chloroplast and this is the inner membrane of the covering glass, okay. Now look at this structure. This is said to be the thylakoid. These are the places where primary pigments and accessory pigments are produced. Primary pigments are of two types, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and accessory pigments are carotenoid and xanthophyll. Carotenoid are of two types, beta carotene and xanthophyll, okay. Now these are actually you do not need to study much more, okay, for these are actually light harvesting molecules. Sunlight shines upon these molecules. They contain chlorophyll A and B and they absorb the sunlight energy and they photosynthesize. This structure is said to be chloroplast. They are present inside the plant cells only. Now we are going to study one of the very important organelle inside the plant. This is the largest organelle inside the plant and animal cell, and it can be say that nucleus is the heart of the cell, or it is the brain of the cell because it controls all the activities of the cells. The nucleus is where the genetic information called DNA and RNA is stored. This helps the cell to make the right sort of proteins. DNA is the most important structure inside the nucleus because it contains genes and the genes have the information to make proteins. Messenger RNA copy the information present on the DNA and move out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. It combines with the ribosomes. Now it has information. The ribosome attaches amino acid according to the information and they produce the protein molecule. The information is kept on the chromosomes. Chromosomes are the tiny structure. Now if you look at the term chrome and soma, it means the colored body. Chrome means colored, soma body. But chromosomes are actually colorless. You cannot see them. Why we can say chromosome? Because they are stained with different dyes and it becomes visible to the microscope, which are inherited from the organism's parents. Chromosome, for example, all living organisms, whether plants or animals, they inherit chromosome from their parents. Or in other words, we can say that chromosomes transfer from parents to their offspring. The chromosomes are made of DNA. DNA is a short form of deoxyribonucleic acid, the most important molecule inside your body, inside every cells and in every cell inside the nucleus, okay? It's a very longer molecule made of nucleotide. Chromosomes are very long but so thin that they cannot easily be seen even using electron microscope. However, when the cell is dividing, they become shorter and thicker and can be seen with a good light microscope. Mitochondria. It's the most important organelle inside the plant and animal cell. There is no mitochondria inside the prokaryotes. Okay? Now, these are actually the factories inside the cells of plants and animals, and they produce ATP. ATP means adenosine triphosphate, the energy-rich molecule or energy. This is the universal energy currency inside the plant and animal cell. Mitochondria are organelles found in almost all of the cell except prokaryotes. Prokaryotes do not contain nucleus and membrane bounded organelle. So mitochondria is membrane bounded organelle. It is a double membrane organelle. The outer membrane is smooth and the inner membrane is much folded to form crystalline. The space between two membranes is called intermembrane space. Now, mitochondria are considered as powerhouse of the cell. They produces energy for the cell by aerobic respiration. Respiration is the oxidation of food. Aerobic means air, where oxygen is required. Anaerobic, where respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. Okay? Number of mitochondria in different cells are different. A highly active cell of liver cell may contain 1000 to 2000 mitochondria per cell, occupying 20% of the cell space. Your brain and your liver cell are the highly active cell. Therefore, they require much more energy than other cells inside the body. Therefore, there are lots of mitochondria in these two types of cells. Dear student, you might have experienced that when you begin exercise on day 1, you cannot work out for very long. On day 2, you can extend the time and so on. Okay, with each and every day, you can increase the time of the workout. It means that each and every day, your cells are adding mitochondria to your muscles, and this increases your stamina of the workout. It means that mitochondria can be increased if you regularly exercise. So all the cells inside your body may contain lots of mitochondria, and they will produce lots of energy-rich molecules for you. Now look at this structure. We studied that mitochondria is a double membrane organelle. Now this is one of the membrane, and this is another membrane, this yellow part. Now you can see that inner membrane is much more folded. These are the folds of the inner membrane. Okay, and now these membrane contain ATP synthase. ATP synthase are actually an enzyme. They make ATP molecule for the cell. Okay, so this structure is only present in eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells contain nucleus and membrane bounded organelles. Now ribosomes are the tiniest organelle inside the plant and animal cells. Ribosomes again are factory of proteins. They make proteins. Okay, ribosomes are the tiniest organelle in all types of cells. Okay, plant, animal, prokaryote, every cell. Ribosomes can only be seen through electron microscope. These are tiny factories of proteins. Ribosomes are so small that you cannot see them through the light microscope. They join amino acid. Amino acid are the smaller molecule for the proteins, or amino acid are the building block for the protein. Amino acid link up with one another to form a longer chain of molecule, and this longer chain of molecule is said to be the protein. This is done according to the instruction carried on DNA in the cell's nucleus. Now, DNA contained inside the nucleus, and the information that is present on the DNA is carried by messenger RNA from the DNA inside the nucleus to the ribosomes outside the nucleus. The nucleus contains tiny pores in them called nuclear pore, and messenger RNA move out of the nucleus through the nuclear pore. Ribosomes are also found to attach to the endoplasmic reticulum, known as rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now, nucleus is surrounded by nuclear membrane, the inner membrane and the outer membrane. The outer membrane is continuous to form the endoplasmic reticulum, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, because it contains ribosomes on them. One of the endoplasmic reticulum, they contain ribosomes, are said to be rough endoplasmic reticulum. Micrometer. Why we study micrometer, as it is a topic of physics? Remember that cells are very smaller. Cells cannot be seen through the naked eyes. Therefore, and we cannot use meter or kilometer to measure the cell. We need to use very tiny units, very smaller units like micrometer. Okay, so cells and structures inside them, such as mitochondria and ribosomes, are so small that we need a very small unit like micrometer in which to measure them. For example, the most useful one is the micrometer, symbol μm. 1 micrometer is equal to 1 into 10 to the power minus 6. It means that if you split the meter into 10 into 10 to the power 6 part, the one part is said to be 1 micrometer, or 1 meter is equal to 10 to the power 6 micrometer. Now, we are going to study cells and organisms. Okay. A large organism such as yourself, human, may contain many millions or many trillions of cells, but not all of the cells are alike. For example, muscle cells are completely different from the cells inside the kidneys. Nephron are completely different from the neurons. Okay, or neurons are completely different from the goblet cell. These are many different types of cells, and these many different types of cells have many different jobs. Almost all of them can carry out the activities which are characteristics of living organisms, but many of them specialize in doing some of these better than other cells do. Okay. For example, almost all of them can carry out the activities which are characteristics of living organisms, but many of them specialize in doing some of these better than other cells do. Muscle cells, for example, are specifically designed to bring movements in one or more parts of the body. For example, you can bend your arm and stretch it. You can bend your arm, you can walk, jump, etc. All the movements inside your body is controlled by your muscle cells. Okay. Now look at here. Most cells in the leaf of plant are specifically or specially adapted for photosynthesis. For example, we studied the palisade layer. The palisade layer contains cells that have lots of chloroplast in them and they photosynthesize. Now we are going to study tissue. What is tissue? Cells join together to form tissue, okay, or group of cells with same activity are found together and they are said to be tissue. Cells which specialize in the same activity are found together. A group of cells like this is called tissue. An example of tissue is a layer of cells lining your stomach. They are composed of goblet cell and they produces gastric juice or for example mucus. These cells make enzymes to help to digest your food. For example, the cells lining the stomach produce gastric juice which contain enzymes, and those enzymes help to digest the food you eat. The stomach also contains other tissues. For example, there is a layer of muscle in the stomach wall made of cells which can move. It means that It contracted and relaxes and mixes the food with the enzymes to digest the food particles. This muscle tissue makes the wall of the stomach move in and out, churning the food and mixing it with the enzymes. Plants also have tissues. You may already have looked at some epidermis tissue from an onion bulb. Okay, onion, you might have seen or you might have experienced the cells in the layer or in the onion bulb. Inside the leaf, a layer of cells make a palisade tissue. Palisade is the upper surface of the leaf, which is loaded with chloroplast. There are lots of chloroplast in them. They absorb sunlight energy and they are specialized to carry out photosynthesis. Now, what is organs? All tissue in the stomach work together, although each has its own job to do. Okay, so many tissues form the stomach. Stomach is an organ. Okay, all tissue in the stomach work together, although each has its own job to do. For example, some of the cells in the stomach, they contract and relaxes to mix the food particles with the enzymes. Goblet cell produce mucus, and the cells in the lining of the stomach produces gastric juice, which contain enzymes which start or which break larger molecule of food into smaller ones. So there are many different types of tissues, and these many different types of tissues have many different jobs, and collectively all those tissues form the organ called stomach. A group of tissue like this makes up an organ. The stomach is an organ. Other organs include the heart, the kidneys, and the lungs. In plants, an onion bulb is an organ. A leaf is another example of a plant organ. Now, leaf may contain, for example, veins and ventlets, midribs, palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll. So all these tissues collectively form an organ called the leaf. Now look at here. Your muscle. This is the biceps muscle. This is the deltoid triceps muscles. Okay, these are, now this is actually your arm is one of the organ of your body. Okay, many different types of tissues, muscle tissue and bones and connective tissue collectively known to form one of your organ. Organ system. The stomach is only one of the organs which help in digestion of food. Okay, one of organ. Other organs are mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, pancreas, liver, rectum, and anus. These are many different types of organ. Collectively, all those organs are known as organ system. The mouth, the intestine, the stomach are all parts of the digestive system. The heart is part of the circulatory system, while each kidney is part of the excretory system. Cells make up tissues, which make up organs, which make up organ system, which make up organism.